This is the Immortal Swindle, and you'll know why it's called that when you see what happens in this game. So Maxime Vachier Lagrave was playing white here. Now he goes by the name Leon Beast when he plays online. He was actually born in Paris, but I guess he lives in Lyon, or maybe did do at one point in time. I'm not completely sure. And his opponent here was Mohamed Sheikh. He's an international master, very strong online blitz player. So this is 3-minute chess. Let's see what happened here. So Maxime goes e4. We had c6, the Caro-Kann defense. And now not d4, but knight f3 instead. Still d5 from black. You basically do that on move 2 regardless in the Caro-Kann. Now knight c3, so a tricky little variation. Now white's goading black to actually go pawn d4, but this isn't so great. The knight can hop back. If you keep coming with the pawn, well actually you're just losing time, helping white develop. And if you say block it, well then you can go c3, start undermining the centre. And actually this is just better for white. You're going to have some problems actually trying to defend this pawn. The queen can bounce out here. So you don't want to kick on here and attack that knight. Instead knight f6 was played. And now we had pawn e5 from MVL. He takes the space. But the knight finds a nice square on e4. And you don't want to be capturing. You give your knight the kick. After it comes into g5. Well, queen d5 is strong, centralising, picking up this pawn. There's not much for white going on here. So we didn't have takes on e4. Instead, this knight e2 move was played. And now the queen came out to b6, already threatening mate in 1. So pawn d4 played, blocks that threat. Pawn e6 now from black. So a super solid setup. Later looking to go things like pawn c5 or pawn f6 to break at that centre. And now a strange looking move from Maxime. He drops this knight back, but he's got an idea, preparing f3, kicking that knight away, and black now gets on with pawn to f6, undermining the centre. Pawn f3 came, the knight hit g5, we had an exchange on f6, pawn took back, and now Maxime goes pawn f4. So he carries on with this pawn move. He lets the knight back in. Now it's a slightly strange looking system to my eyes, because this knight's now nicely solidified. You've weakened some squares around your king, but okay, it's just online blitz here. Maxime now goes knight to g3. He challenges that central knight, also opens up the queen here. Maybe you'll be checking one day, but black just goes bishop d7, allows this takes here, pawn recaptures, and here Maxime didn't go queen h5 check. This looks okay to me. I mean, black can hide out here, come into c7, pawn c5 at the right moment, but the game goes on, it's balanced. Instead, he just plays an absolute blunder in this position. So he goes bishop to c4, looks so natural developing, but can you see the simple one-shot blunder for black to play here? So you can go queen to b4 check. After that one's blocked, you pick up the bishop. So MVL's an entire bishop down here, but he doesn't resign. Then we wouldn't have the Immortal Swindle on our hands. So the queen now came to h5 checking, king d8, the knight develops to e2, pawn c5 strikes at the centre, bishop e3 covered, and now bishop b5 threatens to actually liquidate pieces on e2. You know, black's an entire minor piece up, remember. So the knight came to g3, also attacks this pawn, but queen d3 holds it and starts to invade the position, hits that bishop. So knight f1 was now played, very ugly move, holds the bishop here, and so the queen carried on to c2 here, further invading the position, hitting the b2 pawn, and you can't even defend that one. So Maxime now goes knight to d2, bringing that one back into the game. It no longer needs to cover the bishop, and here actually best for black was just taking this pawn. Now black would have got a bit scared of rook to b1, but then you can actually take here. And white doesn't have time to win the bishop, or you lose this one with check. And equally, if white goes rook to b3 here, kicking the queen to defend the bishop, well then when it drops back to a5, you cover this bishop, you know, completely winning in this position. But okay, black didn't take the pawn, instead thought, well, I'm going to develop a knight instead, just get my pieces into the game. And now Maxime took on c5. The king now came to c7, looking for some safety, although it does allow this check now, picking up this pawn. But anytime you go on that incursion with the white queen, you leave the e2 square and then there could be mating threats. So keep your eye on that. So pawn a4 played. Again, the bishop could take, but it drops back here, keeping an eye on this key diagonal. And now queen f7 check was played. Probably king f2 was better there to preempt the attack on the bishop. But okay, it's all just terrible for white here. You're a minor piece down. The bishop came to e7 blocking. Maxime took here. And now queen d3, threatened mate in 1, also threatens the bishop. And if you try and hold that bishop, well, we check and then we win it on the next move anyway. So instead, the king castled here. Black takes the bishop, and so black is now 2 minor pieces up in this position. This is just insane. So the rook came to the e-file, the queen took here, we had a captures on e4, queen g5 now, and pawn b4, you know, a desperate attempt, flinging these pawns forward. Now there's a threat to fork those pieces, so bishop d3 was played, hits that rook, pawn h4 from Maxime, counter-attack on the queen. Again, you can just take this pawn, best move in the position. The fearless computer plays that one, but here we had queen g8, just looking to swap queens, very normal move. So what does Maxime do here? Well, he plays queen takes on e7 check. I mean, this is just absolute garbage chess from MVL, right? I mean, the knight recaptures, the rook takes backward check. Sorry, I'm laughing. Because when you actually look at this position, white is actually an entire queen down here, and somehow MVL manages to swindle this position. So the king is checked. Now you can come back to b8 here and you're still absolutely fine. You're plus 11 or something like that, or minus 11 for black. Instead, the king comes to c6 right now. The knight comes into f3 here. Now you open up the attack on the bishop. You also threaten this knight d4 check stuff. So rook d8 played, holds the bishop. You can also chop that knight if it comes in with the check. So the rook now comes to the e-file here, threatening to check down there. We had bishop back to f5, covering that square. So we had pawn g4 played now. I mean, this really is just absolute garbage chess here. So the queen captures the pawn. You know, black's still an entire queen up. And now the rook defended the knight here. You can't check on g1. So the queen comes to c4, threatening the check on f1. But b5 check now came. And this is where black just goes horrendously wrong. So can you find the only move in this position to keep the advantage for black? Now the way black had to play here was king takes on c5. Because although you can check here, win the queen, after the recapture, black's still an entire rook up in this position. But instead of doing this one, the king came to d5. I mean, looks natural, you don't give your queen up. But now there's simply a mate in 2 in this position, which is just unbelievable. So if you want to pause and look for it, please do so. Here MVL plays it. He checks on e5. The pawn recaptures, only move. And now this is amazingly a checkmate on the board. The king is just completely hemmed in. So just an absolute swindle from MVL. If you want to see another amazing game, click here. Thanks very much for watching. See you soon.